Welcome back to Building Heavenly Neighbors. If you've been following this journey, we've talked about getting licensed, building the business before the first client, orientation, and building the Heavenly Neighbors team. But today, we're talking about paperwork. And let me tell you, if you're thinking about starting a home care agency and you don't like paperwork, you might want to rethink all of your decisions, okay? Because there is a lot of paperwork. But one thing I've learned while building Heavenly Neighbors is that these documents aren't just papers I'm collecting so I can check boxes. And I love boxes. Each document has a purpose. Some protect the employee, some protect the company, some help us meet employment and regulatory requirements. And ultimately, having good systems helps us protect the people we're actually here to serve. So today, I'm going to show you some of the documents I put together for onboarding our personal care specialist and explain how I organized the process. And just as I've said throughout this whole series, I'm sharing my experience building Heavenly Neighbors in Kansas. This isn't legal, HR, or licensing advice. Requirements may vary depending on your state and your particular business, okay? So let's open the folder, okay? So once I decide I want someone to join Heavenly Neighbors, I don't just say, great, you're hired, see you Monday. No. There is a process. One of the first documents is the offer letter. And I wanted our offer letter to do more than just tell somebody how much they were going to make. I wanted it to establish their position, compensation, and the conditions that need to be satisfied as part of the hiring process. That's important to me because I want expectations to be clear from the very beginning. If I'm asking my personal care specialist to communicate clearly with Heavenly Neighbors, then Heavenly Neighbors needs to communicate clearly with them. Okay? So then we start building employee files. Once someone accepts that offer, the paperwork really begins. Okay? This is where I started realizing that I didn't just need documents, I needed a system for the documents. Because having everything somewhere isn't the same thing as being organized. So I created an employee file process. I use a checklist to track what's required and what's still outstanding. That way I'm not relying on my memory to tell me whether somebody turned something in 3 weeks ago or not. Listen, I got enough stuff living in my head, okay? So this paper, which is my tracker, helps me remember. There are standard employment documents that have to be handled when bringing someone onto the team. Things like maybe your I-9 for employment eligibility, the W-4 for federal tax withholding. There are also payroll-related items, items needed for direct deposit. These things aren't glamorous. Nobody's going to start a home care agency because they dreamed about collecting tax forms. Who does that? But this is a part of becoming an employer. And it was another reminder for me that I wasn't simply building a service. No, I was building an organization. Okay. So now we get to an area that's especially important in home care. Our personal care specialists are going into people's homes. They're working with individuals who may depend on them for everything. So screening isn't something I take lightly. No, there are authorizations and documentation connected to the background check process. There are also driving related requirements. Listen, that includes verifications associated with someone's ability to safely perform responsibilities that involve driving. And again, I created a process for tracking these too. But listen, I don't want to get to the point where I'm ready to match someone with a client and suddenly realize, wait, am I missing something? No, I want that answer before we ever get there. Then comes the documents that define expectations. This is where onboarding started becoming more than simply collecting information. I needed documents that helped establish the professional relationship between Heavenly Neighbors and our personal care specialist, confidentiality, professional expectations, policies, acknowledgments, responsibilities, things employees need to understand about representing this company. Because here's something I've learned: you can't hold people accountable to expectations you never clearly communicated. I don't want someone discovering an important Heavenly Neighbors policy after they've already violated it. No, I want expectations established from the very beginning. And confidentiality is a big one. Home care is personal. We're entering people's homes. We're learning things about their lives, their routines, their families, their needs, and sometimes information that's extremely private. So, listen, confidentiality isn't just another signature in the employee file, it's part of the trust a family places in us. And I want every personal care specialist to understand this. What you learn in someone's home doesn't become conversation outside of that home. Protecting someone's dignity includes protecting their privacy. I also wanted emergency information. Another part of the employee file is emergency contact information. Hopefully, listen, it's information I never need, but that's part of running a responsible business too. You prepare for things you hope never happens. That's true for our clients and it's true for our employees. Then here's the handbook. This was another major project because the employee handbook brings a lot of these expectations together. The policies, the professional conduct, attendance, communication, responsibilities, workplace expectations, and the employee acknowledges receiving and understanding this information. But here's something that became really, really important to me. I didn't want to hand someone a giant document and say, sign here saying you read this. I want our personal care specialists to understand the policies that actually affect how they do their jobs. That's one of the reasons orientation became so important. And this is why I love checklists. Yes, I know nobody who's been following me is surprised. But listen, every employee file has multiple moving pieces. So I created an employee file checklist. And that checklist gives me one place to look and answer, do I have the employment documents? Do I have the required authorizations? Do I have the acknowledgments? Do I have the training records? Listen, is anything still outstanding? Because as Heavenly Neighbors grows, I can't build a system that only works because Tara remembers everything. That's not a system. It's a mess. I need something that another authorized person could eventually follow and understand. That's something I'm trying to be very intentional about while the business is still small. Build for where you're going, not only for where you are. Paperwork isn't onboarding, and this might be the biggest lesson from today's episode. I can have a perfectly organized employee file. Every signature can be where it's supposed to be. Every document can be checked off. And that still doesn't mean someone is ready to provide care. Paperwork gets the administrative pieces in place. It doesn't create a great personal care specialist. That's where orientation, training, competency, and culture come in. And that's exactly where we're going next. So, in the next episode of Building Heavenly Neighbors, I'm going to show you the documents my personal care specialist actually signed and reviewed during orientation. And more importantly, I'm going to explain why I included them. Because there were things I wanted established before anyone represented Heavenly Neighbors in a client's home. We'll talk about confidentiality, acknowledgments, professional expectations, training documentation, competency, and how all of that connects back to what I've been calling the Heavenly Neighbors standard. The way we care when no one is watching. That's when paperwork starts becoming culture. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this entire process. So thank you again for joining me for another chapter of Building Heavenly Neighbors. Remember, excellence isn't something we choose once. It's something we choose every day. And until next time, keep making a difference one neighbor at a time. So I'll see you in the next episode.